Hi and welcome. We are currently in the legislative branch of the Indian Union. To recap, the legislative branch consists of the Parliament. The Parliament in turn is made up of the President, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. In this video, we will further examine the Parliament. Broadly, we will begin by covering the President, his duties, powers and his election. We will then do the same for the Rajya Sabha and then the Lok Sabha. So let's begin with the Indian President. As per the Constitution of India, the President is the head of the state of the Indian Union. He is also the formal head of the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches. The Constitution provides the executive authority to the President to either exercise his powers directly or by subordinate authority. What this means is he can vest his powers in someone else or some other entity and give them the rights to execute those powers. All the presidents in practice vest this executive power in the hands of the Union Cabinet led by the Prime Minister. The President is the head of the legislative branch, and in this video we will examine his role from that point of view. When we examine the executive branch, we will look at his role as the head within that context. So let's begin with the elections. The ruling party in the Lok Sabha, the party that has won the Lok Sabha elections, will present nominees on which the members of the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha and the members of the state assemblies from each state will vote. The voting method is quite complex and not straightforward, and it basically is on the ideas of representation by proportion, and the voting mechanism is actually called a single transferable vote. We will not delve into the details of those mechanisms over here, but for the sake of this discussion, let's just remember that the President is elected by the members of the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha and the members of the state assemblies. An incumbent president can also run for re-election if he or she chooses. Now let's move on to the duties of the president. As the head of the legislative branch, he has the power to dissolve the Lok Sabha. But again, these are formal powers. Conventionally, the president acts upon the advice of other ministers. The president is also the head of the parliament and inaugurates it each year. All bills passed through the parliament need the consent of the president before they can become a law. So let's say, for example, a bill regarding the introduction of a new law is proposed in the Lok Sabha. If the Lok Sabha votes and clears the bill, and the Rajya Sabha also gives its consent to the bill then goes to the president for his consent. Only after his approval can this bill become a law. The president can also send a bill back to the parliament for amendments. He can suggest these amendments as well, but he can only do this once. If the parliament passes the bill again, which means if the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha vote and pass the bill again, the president is obliged to sign it. The exception to these bills are money bills, which are bills regarding taxation and government expenditure, and constitution amendment bills. The reason that money bills are an exception is because they can be introduced in the Lok Sabha after the president's recommendation in the first place. So there's no point that in him rejecting the bill or suggesting amendments to it afterwards, because it was his recommendation to bring the bill in the first place, or he was involved in the process. It was not his direct recommendation, but he was involved in the process which brought this money bill into the Lok Sabha in the first place. It is also the duty of the president to introduce the annual budget before the parliament. It is an introduction that he provides. The finance minister deals more with this matter, but he is formally obliged to introduce the annual budget before the parliament as well. Apart from these, the president is also responsible for appointing various other entities. The party who has the majority in the Lok Sabha elections will nominate a candidate for the role of the Prime Minister. We will look into this later on, into the elections of the Lok Sabha and the Prime Minister. But for now, let's just understand that the party who has won the majority in the Lok Sabha elections is the one who will nominate a candidate for the role of the Prime Minister. The president then comes in and appoints this candidate to the position of the Prime Minister. So the president is in the swearing in ceremony for the Prime Minister, and he officially appoints him as the Prime Minister. And then upon the Prime Minister's advice, he appoints the rest of the Union Cabinet, which is the Council of Ministers, the head of the Department of Space or Atomic Energy, External Affairs, Defense, Finance. All these ministers, all these Council of Ministers is also appointed by the Prime Minister, appointed by the President, upon the advice of the Prime Minister. Theoretically, or Yes, theoretically, the Council of Ministers serves at the pleasure of the President. In practice, the President cannot dissolve the Union Cabinet, only the lack of support from the Lok Sabha can. Among the other duties of the President, it also includes appointing the governors for each state, the ambassadors and the high commissioners to the foreign countries, the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, and many other such posts. To summarize, a little sloppily albeit, the President largely vests most of his power in the hands of various other entities and is largely a ceremonial head of the country. There are, of course, some powers that are unique to the President, such as declaring an emergency or pardoning death sentences. And one such unique case is what we see right now in the National Capital Territory of Delhi, is that the state is under the rule of the President because there has been a violation and the Constitution cannot operate in the absence of the Chief Minister. In the breakdown, in the event that the Constitution, the machinery of the Constitution cannot run as it was intended to, the powers of administration of the state go back to the President, and he then appoints several other entities to handle the administration of the state in the absence of the Chief Minister and the state cabinet of ministers as well. So what we notice are two important things here. The President acts as the head of the executive branch, the judiciary branch, and the legislative branch. And he is the entity that executes his power by vesting it in the hands of the others. As far as the legislative branch is concerned, his main role is limited to giving consents and amendments, suggest amendments to the bills, and formally introduce or recommend certain bills to the parliament, money bills.